Everyone, how's it going? So today's lesson is going to be about naming chemical compounds. So we talked the past couple of classes about ionic and covalent compounds, and we talked a little bit about how they form and stuff like that, but we're going to talk about naming them. So there's a specific way that you name a compound, and it's different for ionic and covalent compounds. In particular, for covalent ones, it can be a little bit more tricky. Ionic has basically just one, but let's take a look. Alright, so when we name chemical compounds, there is a set of rules that we have to follow to make sure that we name them properly. So we're going to start with covalent compounds, and remember, covalent compounds are ones that involve strictly non-metal elements. So when you're naming covalent compounds, usually you're given something that looks like this, and we need to translate it into a name. So this element here is carbon, and this element here is oxygen. Its name is carbon dioxide, which I'm sure you guys have heard of before. But we're going to look at some of the rules to figure out how we name the compound. So the first word, whenever you're naming a compound, it's just the first element that you see. So I'm just going to... So the second word tells us what the second, but it also tells us how many element there are in the compound. So the O is oxygen, and the side from oxygen, there are two. So for whatever the number is, there's going to be a special word that we put in front when naming it. So the prefix, like I just said, tells us how many atoms there are in the compound, and it'll change depending on what the number is. And here's a chart here. So depending on what the number is what the prefix is going to. It should be mono, and we're going to take a look at that in a second as well. But so say we take the element chlorine, when we're writing the name of it, for the second part, it would be chloride, add dichloride, 3 would be trichloride, 4 is tetra, so on. And we're going to take a look at a few examples using these prefixes. So, let me just go back. So the second word in the element always ends in "ide." So that's the suffix. That's like what we put at the end of the word. So for oxygen, for chlorine, it's chloride. If it was fluorine, it would be fluoride. So if we take this example, it's an invisible one here in front. So the name, well, it should tell us that we have one carbon atom and oxygen atom. So the first and would be monoxide. So the mono means one. And also don't forget that the second word should end in I. So there we have the monoxide. Okay, so let's take a look at a few more examples here. I'm just going to go to the full screen here. There we go. So the first one was carbon tri. So the carbon is obviously the letter C. The oxide and the tri is the prefix for 3. So we get CO3, so carbon trioxide. Now, if we were to name CH4, our first element is in. So, and now we have 4 hydrogens. So we're going to take the suffix "ide" and we're going to call it hide. And the prefix is So CH4 would be carbon tetrahydride. If we look at one more, all right, let's do the PS5. So the P stands for phosphorus, and the S is sulfur. So we start with the first element, which is phosphorus. So sulfur, we would change that to sulfide, and the phi, we would use the prefix penta. So PS5 would be phosphorus pentasulfide. Now we didn't talk about ionic bonding yet. Ionic bonding is even more simple because all you have to do is write the name of the metal and then at the end write the name of the nonmetal and change it to "ide." So for example, NaCl, Na is sodium, and Cl is chlorine, so we change it to chloride. Now the nice thing about ionic bonding and naming them is we don't have to worry about the prefixes. So it's just the metal and then the nonmetal and change the ending to "ide." So one more example. MgO. Mg is magnesium and O is oxygen. So we just change oxygen to oxide. So we get magnesium oxide. That's it for this video. There's going to be plenty of chances to practice this, so don't worry too much about it. But if you guys have any questions, you can always ask. Just let me know. Until next time, have a good one, guys. See you.